There's different kinds of evil. There's a way to suppress truth and facts. I want to share with you just a little bit of a CBS 60 Minutes report on what the German authorities do with people who express themselves. You see, free speech is a concept that is uniquely American. And we've seen crackdowns in places like the UK and in Ireland. But I watched just with my jaw hanging open to the floor when 60 Minutes asked a panel of German speech experts and prosecutors what it means to express yourself in Germany and what can happen if you say the wrong thing. Check out the beginning of this report from 60 Minutes.
Is it a crime to insult somebody in public?
Yes.
Yes, it is.
And it's a crime to insult them online as well?
Yes.
The fine could be even higher if you insult someone in the internet.
Why?
Because in internet, it stays there. If we are talking here face to face, you insult me, I insult you, okay, finish. But if you're in the internet, if I insult you or a politician...
That sticks around forever.
Yeah.
If somebody posts something...
The internet is forever, as they like to say. You know, the reason this is important to me is I suspect there's a lot of left-leaning people who love what Germany does. We saw it during the COVID era, during the pandemic. If you said the wrong thing, you were shut down. And there are indeed people who've gone to jail here in America for posts, for online posts, which should horrify every freedom-loving American. Let's welcome to the show a German journalist and political correspondent currently working at the newspaper Welt. Jorg Wimalasena is a German journalist, but of course, before you joined Welt, you spent time in New York City, and I know you became pals with our video producer, Christian, so that's how we kind of made the connection, and I want to welcome you to the show. Thanks for joining us. Where are you now? Where are you located now?
Oh, I'm in Berlin. It's really, really cold.
Great. Well, it's cold in a lot of parts of America right now, too. I think in Minnesota, it's 25 below zero, so... I'm sure you guys use centigrade over there, but it's cold. It's cold over here, as well as in Germany. It's also chilling to consider the German authorities are openly arresting people and prosecuting and fining people for speech. When you heard that 60 Minutes clip that kind of opened our eyes to what's going on in Germany, did that surprise you? I mean, the very first question, is it a crime to insult somebody in public? Those of us big mouths with talk shows, we'd be in big trouble if we got arrested every time we insulted somebody, Jorg.
As the prosecutor said in the show, it all depends. I mean, the thing about the 60 Minutes piece is I'm aware of this because, this has been going on in Germany for a while. I can give you an example for that. Basically, during COVID, they tightened... slander laws, and, you could get prosecuted more easily if you could insult politicians. And that's something that doesn't connect well, with the way we like to think about free speech, because Germany is a free speech country. And we used to have a big tradition of making fun of politicians. Our former chancellor, Helmut Kohl, he was a good German. He liked his roast, he liked his sausages, and it showed, So people would depict him. So people would depict him as like a light bulb or like a pear, and had like branches and leaves coming out of his head. He never sued anybody, right? But especially during COVID, when parts of the German government became a little bit authoritarian, they also became a little bit thin-skinned when it came to criticism, right? And so they basically passed a law that increased the fines for specifically making fun of politicians. And that is something for me that's concerning. And you mentioned leftists before. I consider myself a leftist with some libertarian sprinkles. But I think free speech is a bipartisan issue. And there was this one thing that wasn't mentioned in the 60 Minutes piece that made some waves a couple of months ago. It was basically a retired guy who posted a meme on Twitter, or X as it's called now, that basically called our vice chancellor, I think, it's basically, it amounts to an idiot. He called him an idiot. That's a rather mild insult. I call people, like 5 people, an idiot before breakfast.
Listen, I wrote a book, a New York Times best-selling book years ago. The title of my book was "Surrounded by Idiots: Fighting Liberal Lunacy in America." I'd be in big trouble in Berlin.
Yeah, but you didn't specifically address anybody as that, right? Because they could get you in trouble in Germany.
Wow. I didn't mean to interrupt you, but this guy calls a
Yeah, hold
politician
on.
an idiot, and what happened to him?
And what happened to him next was so the guy is a retired, member of the armed forces, lived in a modest house, his kid has Down syndrome, and they basically knocked on his door, raided his house at like 6 in the morning. They took away his computer, they took away his cell phone. And that's something that I did find rather unsettling in the 60-minute piece that you mentioned earlier, that some of these prosecutors, I got to be careful with my word, I don't want to get sued, but they seem to be almost gloating in what they're doing to people. Like, there's this guy pointing, and it really, it's kind of funny because it's the way that Germans are depicted, like as Bond villains, and the guy's just showing like a file where he says, oh, this guy, had to pay 3,500 euros. That's more than a parking ticket. And that's right. Something, that I find unsettling, although, it is kind of funny because, we kind of needed that outside perspective, an outside look on how ridiculous some of this has gotten. There's another example. I think this is like one of the first prime examples when this was happening. There was a state official in Hamburg, 2021, and during COVID, a lot of people, including me, were a little bit unsettled of, the stuff that was going on. There were people like there was police cars chasing people in Hamburg through a park because they were gathering outside in a group that was larger than permitted. People had to wear masks while like sledding down a hill in winter, like in the outside. Yeah. You could only have like 2 or 3 families, together on Christmas Day, but not the day after.
Look, like Jorg, the COVID insanity was worldwide. I mean, here in the United States, I saw one video of a cop wading out into the ocean because there was a surfer who was out on a surfboard by himself in violation of COVID restrictions, and so the cop was literally in the water making an arrest. Yeah, no kidding. But I'm also intrigued by something you said about the 6 a.m. raid. On the guy who you say insulted a German politician, because in the piece by 60 Minutes, and I find this really fascinating. If this was a deceitful effort to mislead people into what the guy posted, I'm reading from the Sharon Alfonsi piece from CBS.com. It's 6:01 on a Tuesday morning. We were with state police as they raided this apartment in northwest Germany. I think this is the same
guy. I'm sorry to interrupt. It's a different guy. It's a different story.
Oh, good.
The one that I meant wasn't. No, actually, CBS did quite a good job. There's less, in reporting this piece. I wouldn't say inaccuracies, but they tend to think about it in a wrong way. Like they basically said that's because of like the Nazi crimes of the past, that basically we have all these hate speech laws. That goes for some laws. For example, that goes for the law that says you can't show swastikas, or you can't show like mentions. And I gotta say, I kind of support that. You can't have people running around in the streets doing Hitler salute. Germany's not
hate speech. Yeah, but to insult somebody, and then you get into the whole question of who gets to determine what an insult is, and circling back for a moment to your. But circling back to your point about gloating, that was the impression a lot of us had from 60 Minutes, that they seemed to be enjoying the way German citizens were being rounded up or arrested. I mean, look at this. It's 6:01 on a Tuesday morning. Inside, 6 armed officers searched a suspect's home, then seized his laptop and cell phone. Prosecutors say those electronics may have been used to commit a crime. The crime, posting a racist cartoon online. At the exact same time, across Germany, more than 50 similar raids played out. Part of what prosecutors say is a coordinated effort to curb online hate speech in Germany. I mean, I got to tell you, Jorg, that terrifies the hell out of Americans when we read about that.
There's even more to this, Mike. There's companies, that basically specialize in suing people for online so-called hate speech. They have an AI that they basically train to just swipe through the internet, to find something offensive. And the thing is, like offended, you in order to be offended, you have to be even aware, of something like this is happening. And the
Right.
story that I told you earlier about that retired armed forces guy, that idiot meme that he posted, our vice chancellor wasn't even aware of it. Basically,
Right.
the prosecutors went to him and said, "Oh yeah, this guy said this about you. Don't you want to sue him?" And he filed more than 700 lawsuits.
Wow.
And another minister did about 500. And I'd say, let me add this, just a little bit of domestic German politics. The Green Party, they're both from the Green Party, and they're basically generation woke politicians.
Right.
They
of
can't really
course.
take a joke. And it's concerning to me because in the 60-minute piece, there's this woman from Hate Aid, and it's just like, yeah, people don't want to comment online anymore because they're afraid of hate speech. And I'm wondering, what about the people that don't want to voice their opinion online anymore because they're afraid to get sued? And the thing is, there's a certain class element to this, because obviously if you're familiar with the law, maybe if you have a background in law, you know what you can post and you know what you can't post. But if you're a little guy like this guy, who probably isn't educated about, these complicated laws, it's basically people in charge, people in power going after the little man, and while swapping around the power constellation, because it's the people, like our vice chancellor is one of the most powerful persons in Germany, and you would say he could stand, like a little fun to be made of. Where I would draw the difference is when it comes to, actual threats, that are happening. And this
Right,
is
of
something that
course.
they prosecute as well. Because, in America, if you were, to threaten whatever presidential candidate, they would go after you unless you happen to be hiding on a slightly sloped roof and they can't get to
Sure.
you. So I kind of agree with that.
Well, it is a fascinating and scary time. Thankfully, we've got a guy named Donald J. Trump who's a little high. He's pretty high on free speech in America. So I think that I hope we have some guardrails.
It's like 2 newspapers now.
You got exactly. Jorg Wimalasena, thank you for joining us from Berlin, from the Welt newspaper here on the Mike Gallagher Show, and bringing us your perspective. We appreciate you joining us, Jorg, very, very much. 20 past the hour.
For full shows, live and on demand, it's Salem News Channel.